150, 160. He's gone.
What's up, guys? Today we're in the garage doing a little bit of late night fabrication. I won't get into what project this is going into right now, but it's basically just for my buddy's business. It's going into an RV, which some of you guys should keep in mind when you see the schematics for this. But the thing that we're building tonight is a fairly basic shower curtain holder set. But the thing that makes it a little bit tricky is we want to build it exclusively out of that raw steel look to go with several other things that we're building for the trailer. And because it's an RV, none of the dimensions are really standard house type stuff. Everything's a lot smaller, a lot tighter. So the issue is we have the bathroom looks like this. So this is your sink right here. This is your shower stall. All of these walls are tiled, but this wall exceeds further out this way. So the bar has to basically sit flush on this wall, but this is the shower edge right here. It actually runs out past here, and there's about a 6-inch gap in here. And the idea here is we're going to build a mount that sits flush with this wall, comes out and has a hole in it that lets the shower curtain basically sit like this. And so the plan over here is pretty straightforward. For the base plate, we're going to cut a 2-inch by 2-inch piece of steel. We're going to cut a piece of round tube and drill some holes on the inside for mounting it to the tile. Cut a piece of round tube, and then we're going to slit this round tube so that the shower curtain rod, which is 1-inch diameter, will fit nicely in there. And that's one half. The other half is the piece that has to come out from the wall. So again, we're going to do a 2 by 1-inch back plate. And then onto that, we're going to weld this piece right here, which is going to have a 1-inch, slightly over 1-inch diameter hole in it to fit the rod. And what's important is that this distance from the center of this hole to this plate has to be 7/8 of an inch, because this plate is 1/8 of an inch, and we have to be exactly 1 inch basically out this way for this to work properly. So what I have here is some 1/8 inch plate. And what we're going to do is we're going to cut out this. This is one back plate, other back plate, and then the holder plate. We're going to use this. I got this in a drop basically for free. It's just a random piece of Dom tubing. It's pretty heavy, pretty thick, but we only need about 3/4 of an inch of it. And it's going to go right here. Going to weld it on right here to fit and hold the shower curtain rod. And then I may end up using this. This is fairly thin wall steel. I also got as part of the drop. It's a little bit warped, but it should be long enough that we can cut a pretty straight piece. And we may end up making the shower curtain out of this as well. And so basically do a complete set, but I don't have those dimensions yet. So tonight we're just gonna do these pieces right here and get it hopefully all welded together. So let's get started. So I figure we start out with the easiest, which is just cut out this 2-inch by 2-inch square. And for that, we're going to use the bandsaw. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to go on the outside of this line, because this line is exactly 2 inches, because the bandsaw is going to wobble a little bit. It's just inevitable. And so we're going to try to go on the outside of this line and then grind it flush on the grinder once we get it cut. Since we're on a roll with the bandsaw, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to cut this out larger than it needs to be, and we're going to waste a little bit, but just because of how big this piece of sheet metal is, it's just not effective to try to cut this out exactly. On this piece first, and the first thing we want to do is we want to clean up all of these edges, take all these sharp burrs down, and what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to radius the corners just a little bit to give it a nice finished look. So we're just going to pinch it in the vise and give it a go with the angle grinder. There you go, looks nice and clean, and when we finish we're going to hit it with a belt sander all the way around to get the last of these rough edges off. Now, next matter of business for this piece is to cut 3/4 inch slice off of this, clean it up, weld it on there. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to clean this edge off and see just how flush it is. So that right there is definitely weldable. So now what we got to do is we got to measure, and I've been putting some thought into it, and I think that making this 3/4 of an inch deep is pretty heavy duty. I'm going to go ahead and fabricate this, and I think 3/4 is about right to give us a little bit of wiggle room, but I've seen some of these that are only about 1/2 inch, so basically just a little tiny lip, and I don't really like the way that looks. So we're going to go with 3/4 of an inch, and I'm going to bust out the bandsaw again here in a minute, and we're going to just chop our way through this. Well, that's good enough to weld, and what we're going to do is after we weld it, then we can grind the top of this absolutely flush, because the welding is going to take care of any gaps along the bottom. As you can see, I've actually already traced out the circle where this needs to be. That's how it's going to sit. Now, there is one more caveat here, and that caveat is there has to be a slit in here for this to drop in. So before we can weld this onto here, the next step we have to do is we have to kind of drill that, sorry, not drill, but slash cut in those pieces so that this rod can drop in. And the only way to do that is to measure this out as closely as we can. Alright, now I measured it out, and it turned out it was exactly 5 millimeters from each edge is where this needs to be. So now that we've done that, we're going to use this, attempt to use this, there we go. There we go, now we got the 4 holes right on the inside edges, 4 little notches, and that'll help us just kind of find where this needs to be. So here's the piece that has to slide into this piece, and so at its widest point, that's going to sit in here quite comfortably. And the reason for this, the reason this is larger, is that as the RV is pulled, this might rock a little bit, but it should never pop right out. There's plenty of space in here for it to always just be kind of bouncing around inside. And so here's the seam where this is hot rolled and welded, and so that is what I'd like to remove. So we're going to just take this, center this like that, and just kind of mark that with our soapstone. That's kind of hard to see on here, but it's like that basically. That's what we're going to chop out, and we can always grind out a little bit more if we need to. There we go. Now let's see if this drops through. Nope, didn't quite get it. But now what we're going to do is we're going to grind this out anyway, so it's not really going to matter too much. Wow, that's basically perfect. So we're just going to leave it at that. And here's where it gets tricky, because we really need this facing as close to perfectly upright as we can. The other thing is we really still need to clean off this metal, and the reason I use the punches is we have to actually hit this with a wire brush. We're going to clean up these pieces before I weld them. So you can see it looks quite a bit different than it did a few moments ago. And now what we're going to do is we got to get this basically centered in here. Then we can get the welder out and start welding it into place. Okay, so we got it all centered, all squared up exactly how we need it. Double check this real quick just to make sure. That's 5 millimeters, 5 millimeters. Alright, next step is we're going to bust out our buddy here, the belt sander, and basically just belt sand this flat. Now the truth is I forgot to turn on the camera when I did this. It's actually already done. But basically now if you take a look, this is a straight edge. It is perfectly flush. Next step is we got to drill the 2 holes for the screws, and we're just going to be using these standard screws that come with the kits that have those little plugs for tile. So I'm not sure what diameter these are, but we're going to basically drill for this and then chamfer the inside so that they will be mounted from the inside. But it's a little bit easier to mark up and drill out through the back. And so first step whenever you're drilling something like this is to use an impact punch like this or a real punch, and basically just put little dots in there so that you know exactly where to drill. And then you can just find your impact mark and drill a pilot hole. Now the next step is, you can see I've taped this up, and what we're going to do is we're going to cover the back of this, the part that will go up against the tile, with this stuff. This is Rust-Oleum truck bed liner, and I covered my welding cart in this stuff a while back, if you guys remember, and it came out really well and I really liked it. So I was like, well, this would make a nice long-term solution as a barrier, but it's not so thick that it's going to be noticeable once it's mounted up there. And so we taped everything else off because we want to maintain that classic metal look everywhere else. But we really want to give this back plate a little bit of black paint. And that is plenty. This stuff comes out real heavy, so you don't need to use a whole lot of it. So now we're basically finished with that first piece. Can't really do much with it until the paint dries. The next step is this guy right here, which is going to be the bracket that sticks out. And so the way this works is this will be welded onto here, this will be bolted to the wall, this will have a hole drilled in it, and the rod will slide through that hole. First thing we have to do is we have to create this curve, and I've already started making it by using a piece of tube to kind of give us a good idea. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the bandsaw and we're going to just chop off these corners. And after that, we're just going to have to use the angle grinder to get it just right. I mean, if I was like super pro-ski, I'd be like, oh, I'm just going to stick this in my Bridgeport mill or something like that. But fortunately, I don't have one of those. happens, I have a tiny little can of spray paint that happens to be the exact diameter this is. And what I've been doing is I just mark it with a marker, and then you can see where on top there's still a little bit of marker, and that's where we're going to remove material. See how close we can get to having this kind of exact curve. There's a little bit too much material removed here. There's a little bit of a flat spot. So we're going to try to duplicate that on the other side as well. Against the can, it's basically perfect. So now that we've done that, we can get rid of this death trap contraption and drill out our hole. So next step is to drill a pilot hole in this piece, and then we're going to use a step-out bit to get our 1-inch diameter hole. Another requirement was that this had to be exactly 7/8 of an inch. Oops, off the backing plate, because it had to be a whole inch right off the wall, dead center. And that's basically where we're at. We're at just under 7/8 of an inch. So once we drill it out, there'll be a little bit of wobble, it'll be perfect. So we are finally at the step before the step we need, and you can see that like, it just doesn't fit. So we're going to ream it out a little bit more so we can get it to fit. Now that we have our hole made, it fits quite nicely. Next step is to use a tool like this. This is like a deburrer or whatever you want to call it. So there's our second piece, and so what we got to do now is we got to weld this together, and then drill a few holes, and then spray paint the back of this, and good to go. get this painted up as well. Alright, now that we have this backing and it's mostly dry, we're left with these, so they're done. So here is our little piece of pipe that represents the shower curtain rod. So that fits in there nicely. It's kind of tight. You gotta really pop it in there, and it'll just sit in here and work pretty well. And then on this side, we have a little bit of a gap again, just so it can move around so it looks appropriate. And we've actually chamfered this ring in here on both sides, so it's nice and clean. I had to grind down the welds a little bit on this one because the bolt clearance was just really, really tight. So we drilled holes and got our bolts in. So the next step we got to do is put some gloves on and clean this stuff off with denatured alcohol, and then wipe it down with Penetrol to get that nice metallic seal. Now the trick with the Penetrol is obviously to clean everything, make sure it's prepped, and then you just really want to give it a nice kind of even coat. You don't need to go super duper crazy with it, but you want to make sure that everything gets covered, and in this case, you got to ensure that you get all the edges. Now the Penetrol is not really going to react with the whatchamacallit, the truck bed liner that we sprayed in here. It's not going to give it any problems, but we want to make sure we get down into all these welds and stuff and give it a nice even coating. So there we go. Everything is covered in Penetrol, and you can see that it looks really, really good. At least I think it looks really, really good. It'll be another hour or so before this is dry enough to touch with your hands, but with Penetrol you really want to leave it until it's done. And when it's done, you'll know it's done because you'll be able to touch it. There won't be any greasy feeling. You won't get any residue on your hands. It'll just be really, really nice and clean. And so I'm really happy with the way this turned out. There's our shower curtain rod and how it fits. Fits quite nicely, nice and snug. And the undersides turned out really well with the spray-on bed liner as well. And so these pieces are done, and once I get the final measurements, I will build a shower curtain rod. It'll be nothing more than this pipe cut down to a specific length, and I'll cut out and weld on end caps to it. I'm not going to film that, but I really, really like the way this turned out. You can see that there's, from the heat, you can see there's a lot of different marks in the metal, some of it where I ground, some of it where I didn't. These kind of small pieces really have a lot of character. And when you put them into something like an RV, you know, 95% of the time, or in your home, 95% of the time people won't notice, but every now and then somebody does. And it's really, to me, I really like the fact that people do notice things like this, and they comment on them, and they're like, wow, that's really unique, because you're not going to find something like this anywhere else. I mean, you can find mass-produced kind of versions of what you see here, but it will never look quite the same. So that's what I got for you guys. This whole project, not counting downtime, took, I don't know, about 2.5 hours, almost 3 hours. And there's just a lot of little fabrication steps and stuff along the way. So thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe. Make sure you take a look on Instagram at MaksWerks. I post a lot of pictures on there, kind of mid-process as well, and that way you can see the stuff I'm building, you know, weeks and sometimes even a month before it comes out on YouTube. Peace.